and welcome to NONI, Yanga's flagship talk show where we discuss the topics that you, our viewers at home, are talking about just that little bit louder. I'm Afua Adom and today I'll be asking my guests, has marriage had its day? But first, let's welcome them. Joining me today are presenter and blogger Natalie De Silva, emotionally focused couple therapist Nick Poiros, and presenter and networking queen Esther Allarday. Welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Marriage. It used to be the economic support for women, but now a woman doesn't have to live in poverty if she doesn't marry. It's no longer frowned upon for her to work, and although there is still a pay gap, it's reducing every single day thanks to lobbying and legislation. It used to be the only accepted way to have and bring up children, but single parent families are no longer stigmatized. We don't consider children with unmarried parents as shameful and illegitimate, and in fact women don't even need a man in their life if they want to get pregnant, but it helps. The numbers of people getting hitched are decreasing, whilst the numbers of people cohabiting are on the rise. Even the practice itself has evolved and can now include the union of two people of the same sex. With all these facts staring us in the face, isn't it true to say that marriage has had its day? Panel, let's discuss. This is a big one. Natalie, has marriage had its day?
I think it has, but personally, I still value marriage. I think.
Are you married?
I'm not married, no.
Okay. Are you looking? Now's the time. Put an appeal out and just
putting it out there.
Yeah. Call in if you want to marry.
Yes. For me, yes, I am aspiring to be married, only because I feel like I've come from a home that was based around marriage, two-parent household, bringing up the kids in one house. So I'm used to that. So for me, I would want the same for myself as well. But I know nowadays marriage is not seen as kind of the ultimate goal. So I think it has outdated because there's a lot of kind of new ways to live, cohabit together with other people.
Yep.
But personally, it is outdated, I would say.
Yeah. Now, Nick Poiros, you're a relationship counsellor. Give me your full title there.
My full title,
Yes.
Emotionally Focused Couple Therapist.
What's an emotionally focused couple therapist?
So
Tell me.
What an emotionally focused couple therapist tries to do is to help people really get down below the reactive place where you know, with a couple that's going through a difficult time, they're often fighting, attacking each other, you know, looking out to see who's done the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Now, that from an emotionally focused perspective, that's what's happening sort of on the surface, but really underneath what's happening, sort of what we call under the wire, is that people are just longing to be loved.
Oh,
to
trying to make me cry.
to be valued, you know, to feel like that their partner is has got their back.
So you're saving marriages?
Effectively, you know, one of the things
You're
I
like
do
marriage Superman.
I have been called the psychological magician by one of my couples.
I like that. Are they still together?
Oh, I can't say.
That's a yes. Excellent. So do you think that marriage has had its day?
I think marriage has been evolving from, you know, what, 4,000 years ago when it first started. So I don't know if it's had its day. It's changing, and you know, it's not the only way to be together.
Yes.
You know, there are many ways to be together.
Now, Esther, do you think we put too much importance on the word marriage and the traditional values that we associate with marriage?
I think we do, and I think we should. I didn't necessarily come from the typical marriage, you know, one husband, wife. I came from a home where my dad had two wives.
Wow.
And it worked for us. I had a great childhood growing up, and this was in Nigeria. My dad was well to do. My mum went and ran the business with him. My stepmom ran the home. And for us, that was my norm. Although I wouldn't necessarily want that for myself. And I understand the importance of just having somebody there and sharing the bills, for example. Just
taking out the bins.
Exactly. just the little things, you know, you know, in terms of financially, I think it does help. to be coupled up with somebody or to be married.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what Love Island's all about. Now, I do have some statistics for you. I like a stat. So, fewer young people are getting married. I couldn't believe when I read that the sharpest fall in marriage rates for opposite sex couples, that's for men and women under the age of 20. I'm still shocked that people under the age of 20 are getting married, but since 2005, this has decreased by 56% for men and 66% for women, which I think is good, to be honest. But as fewer young people are getting married, the average age for marriage has gone up, of course. Now, for opposite sex couples, the average age for men marrying is 37.5, and the average age for women is 35.1. Which I think is a lot older than I expected. I expected it to be around 28, 30, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So do you think, well, obviously people are waiting. What do you think people are waiting for?
I think it's more of a financial thing. I think nowadays people are more focused on building their careers, making sure that they can, when they do have enough money, they can fend a family. And I think nowadays, because life is becoming really more expensive, so they're thinking, maybe I shouldn't get married now, because let's not be honest, like having a wedding dress is not cheap, do you know what I mean? And renting out halls is so expensive. So I think people are kind of waiting now, or in a sense, maybe just cohabiting, because they know that they will save that money for their future instead.
No, don't you think that's a good point? Isn't it more important that you perhaps buy a property together? Because people say that's probably more of a commitment than standing up in front of 300 of your closest friends and family and hiring the DJ and doing all that. Buying a house together is important. Having a child together, isn't that just as a commitment, Nick?
Well, of course it is a commitment, and buying a house is like a huge financial commitment. And having children, of course, is a commitment. And, you know, but also I think young people want to have experiences as well, you know, before they get hitched, and perhaps they also are looking, you know, to see, you know, find the right one. And I don't, you know, being of a slightly different generation, I'm just 33. Just, you know, this, like the hookup culture, I don't know how that's affecting people, you know, so does that make it more difficult? In my practice, not just in my own, but in the practice that I work at, we see a lot of young people that are struggling to find partners. You know, they're going on to Tinder or whatever it is, and, you know, they're finding these relationships which are just so short, you know.
I think I would definitely agree with you there, Nick. And when you said that it's evolving, it's also evolving in terms of how we're dating.
Yes.
When I was younger, when everybody was younger,
that was only 2 years ago.
Only 2 years ago. You know, you had the chance to kind of go out on dates. You could socialise a bit more. People were around, but now you've got phones. You've got people thinking it's okay to just text you as opposed to call you. And, you know, you have people who have relationships via text, and they think they're in a relationship.
Which is a really hard.
It's ridiculous.
You know, that's not a relationship.
No, it's not. But it's all changing. Definition of relationships are changing. As we said, marriage is also evolving, and that's changing people's definition of it. But I think in terms of waiting till you're older, yes, because you want to secure yourself. You want to be secure in yourself. You want to know who you are. You want your career to be at a certain level, especially as a woman. You don't want to be dependent on a man per se. I don't want to go into a marriage because, I feel that you can financially look after me, when I know mothers before me that hasn't, you know, they've been stuck in a marriage where they were financially dependent on a man.
Absolutely.
So I think for women, you know, it's like, okay, I want to get myself together. I want to be able to own my own in anything I go into. So
Now, Nick, do you find yourself in your practice trying to keep people together in marriage?
I mean, often, you know, when a couple come, they're in distress, but they're coming often to try and strive for that relationship. They, you know, they're sort of fighting for it, even though they're fighting each other
for it.
The problem is often couples leave it for too long. This has been going on for maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, and if they could just come in earlier, it would make my job much easier. But I end up holding the hope for a couple to stay together. Now, if they don't stay together, and let's say they've got kids, if the conclusion is they can't do it, then what I want to do is help a couple separate with honour, with dignity, so that they can carry on their relationship. They're going to be linked by children. You know, and the ideal is for both of the parents to be involved with the children, and
That's
they're
the
not
ideal.
to be.
Yeah. So do you still believe in this traditional idea and concept of marriage?
Well, it's tricky. You know, I think it's got a validity. It's a commitment. But I also think there's other ways of making commitments. And so I think marriage in itself is evolving and will evolve, and maybe will look different in the future, as it has done over the last 4,000 years.
I think the mistake we make is that we try to pigeonhole and say how a marriage should be for everyone.
Yes.
But every relationship is different.
That's right.
And however you identify or define your relationship to be should be entirely up to you.
Yeah.
Whereas I think people try to make it seem like a man should be earning more than a woman. And as a man, you don't want to get married because you feel that you should be earning more than a woman. But actually, no. If you can have a compromise and have an understanding relationship, then your marriage should look how you want it to look.
And that's the point. Marriage can be different for everyone. Thank you so much, guys. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to ask my panel, do they think governments should be promoting and rewarding cohabiting couples to ensure they enjoy all the positive effects marriage has on children? See you after the break. Welcome back to NONI with me, Afua Adom, and my guests, Natalie De Silva, Nick Poiros, and Esther Allarday. So the question we were discussing before the break was whether or not marriage has had its day. But now I want to tell my panel about a 1998 report by Rutgers University that revealed one of the worst things that could befall a child would be the continuation of the current shift away from marriage. This was because the children of unmarried parents have fewer economic resources and receive less parenting from their fathers. They also face a much greater risk of parental breakup, leading to 2 to 3 times the risk of having serious social problems when they become adolescents and young adults. And compared to a child living with 2 parents, the child is much more in danger of being seriously abused, both sexually and physically. The report estimated that almost half of children growing up today will spend some time living with an unmarried cohabiting couple, and considered that a national tragedy. So, should we accept marriage is on the decline but be lobbying governments to promote and reward cohabitation? Panel, what do you think? First of all, that report sounded like it was really, really fun to put together. Utterly grim, if you ask me. Cohabiting. Now, there's people all over the country, up and down, people who could be watching now, who are not married, but could be married for 50 years, have 8 wonderful, beautiful, non-murdering, non-abused children, have 25 grandchildren, have very successful lives. Shouldn't they be rewarded in the same way that a couple who's been married for 50 years? Married couples get tax breaks and they get confetti on Christmas Day and like all this stuff. Shouldn't we be rewarding cohabiting couples in the same way? Natalie?
I think, do you know what, there's a blurred line though, because I think marriage provides a commitment that is to the government, to your friends and family. And I think once you start rewarding cohabiting parents, it kind of blurs the line a bit, because then it's like, are you with each other for life, or is this kind of like a short-term thing? So marriage is there, I think, more in the sense of governments to prove that yes, we are together, we're going to raise these children. And I think when you start to provide maybe some rewards to cohabiting parents, it might be a little bit tricky, and it'll be hard to decide whether, you know, are these couples, you know, going to be together for a long time, because you just don't know with cohabiting.
But you don't know with marriage.
That is true. You don't know with marriage, but when you sign papers, that is a commitment in itself.
But when you sign papers or not, people can and will still get divorced.
That is true.
And divorce is expensive.
It is. It is.
It's a
She's trying to trick
deterrent.
me up.
I guess it's a deterrent, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you sign on that piece of paper, you're less likely to try and find your way out of it.
Exactly.
You work at your marriage.
But
you try to anyway.
Yeah.
But maybe that piece of paper actually stops conversations about what that commitment's about, because it's sort of already set out in stone what you're going to do, and there's conversations that probably never happen. And you know, again, you know, sort of to talk about what I see in my consulting room, but So obviously I see couples in distress for various different reasons, and some are because they've had children and the relationship changes between the parents.
Yeah.
But also, I have couples come in that have had affairs. There's an affair there. Now, 40% apparently of marriages, there is cheating going on in 40%. So that's because I think conversations didn't happen beforehand. You sort of slide into marriage and don't talk about, what are the rules of this union or this cohabiting. I think if you're cohabiting, you could also have conversations saying, what do we mean by this commitment? What does it mean for us?
And cohabiting couples, now let me just be devil's advocate here. If you're cohabiting, you don't have that piece of paper, you don't have to go through a divorce, it's much easier to walk away. So those cohabiting couples, are they not perhaps stronger because they don't necessarily have that commitment, they haven't necessarily stood up in front of family, friends and God and said they're going to do this thing, but they've stayed together. That's a level of commitment. Don't you think so?
It is, and it's a good point you make actually, because in a sense, cohabiting couples, it is easier for them to walk away. So in that sense, are you willing to take the risk to just one day your partner wake up and say they don't want to do this no more, rather than to be in a marriage and be like, for them to part ways, there's a big process with that. So I think having that level of security in a sense provides better support, not to only yourselves, but to the children or to the house that you built.
I don't know if I agree with that, because if you're cohabiting, it's a similar thing to being married and living together. So I don't think it would necessarily be easier to walk away, because you have things that are tied together as well. You might not have the piece of paper, but you might have accounts, or there's so many things that you have got together that you have to sort out. So I don't think it's easy for people to walk away. And I feel that maybe some people who do cohabit, genuinely, some of them do want to get married. Some women actually do want to get married, but just don't know how to raise the subject to say, I want to,
because you find yourself in this situation, you think that your partner's happy, but in fact, you want a bit more. But also, if you think about it, if you've got 3 kids in the house, do you really want to spend your money on a wedding? Wouldn't you rather pour that into your children? School uniforms and all the rest, all those kind of things.
Well, assuming weddings are expensive, weddings don't have to be expensive. You can just go straight to the registry office and get that license.
But the expectation of many people is to have the big blowout, isn't it?
It's the romance of it.
The big dress, the party, the whole thing. I don't know. Also, I'm just, I was thinking that, maybe the statistic that you brought up about people getting married later. And just thinking about some of my friends that got married or didn't get married, the friends that wanted to cohabit and said, we're never getting married. We don't believe in that. But then secretly they got married because there's inheritance issues around if you're unmarried. There's inheritance tax, there's all sorts of financial benefits at the moment to be married. So maybe some of those benefits should be transferred as well to cohabitants.
Well, absolutely, because like we said, you could be with someone for 40 years, unmarried. Unfortunately, something happens to one partner, and then the other partner receives absolutely nothing. But if you've poured 40 years into your life and building this family and this relationship, shouldn't you be entitled to something, Esther?
I think you should be entitled to something. So yes, in that sense, in terms of the law, if you can prove that you've been together for a certain amount of time, I think people should be rewarded equally. I think if you can prove that, then I think you should be rewarded. I don't think that should be taken away from anyone.
And what about things like tax breaks? Because if you're cohabiting, you're gonna, if you have 2 incomes, you reduce the amount of outgoings yourself because you have someone else to do that with. If you're married or cohabiting, it doesn't matter that piece of paper or not. So why shouldn't cohabiting couples and families get those same tax breaks?
But I think it's like anything else, isn't it? You need a license to prove that you can drive. So some of these things, I think it's proof that I am with this person.
So you're saying that marriage is a license?
Yeah, it's a license
But it is though,
isn't
it? Because you're signing a piece of paper and you're declaring to the government that I am with this person. I'm declaring with you.
But those same men who are declaring to the government, those same men and women that are declaring to the government that are with those people are not declaring to the people they're cheating with that they're married. That's true. Am I wrong?
We can't comment on those people.
Unfortunately, we can't. But it's true, isn't it? So married or cohabiting, married or not, if you want to cheat on someone, if you don't want to commit to that commitment, you won't do it, right? Does that make sense?
I get it.
If you're cohabiting, you can get out. If you're married, you can get at. We're talking about families and children and bringing it up in the best way possible.
That's the key thing, the children with families. And when you've got a couple or whatever the setup is, it's how do you, and maybe government, how does government and society ensure that those kids aren't traumatised? Because I reckon, I don't know about that study as such, that's 20 years old, 1998.
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
But there
1998.
But there have been studies that have looked at single parenting, adoptive parenting, and traditional marriage couples and same-sex couples. And if you take the trauma away, so the children that are more likely to have psychological issues are the ones that have been traumatised, and separation or divorce is a trauma.
But also,
if it's done in an acrimonious way.
But isn't staying in an unhappy marriage as a child and seeing your parents grow up bitter, hating each other and throwing salad bowls at each other's heads, isn't that traumatising?
Well, that's going to be traumatising too. But the key thing about some more recent studies is that if you take away those traumatised children, actually there's no difference between, kids fare equally well whether they're in single parent families, adoptive families or married families. Now, that's like sort of saying that I'm pro everything. In a way, I am pro everything, but if people want to sort of go for marriage, then go for it and understand what you're committing for.
I think I understand your point. And you mentioned earlier on that people go into it not knowing what they're going into.
Yeah.
And that's where you have churches or religious bodies who ensure that you get the right therapy. You go into relationship therapy or relationship therapy, so you know what you're getting yourself into. Are you actually compatible? Financially, are we compatible? Do we have the same morals? Do we know where we're going in this relationship? And then at the end of it, you make a decision whether or not this person is right for you or wrong.
But haven't cohabiting couples and families made that decision? Or is there sort of an assumption that if you're cohabiting, you've just fallen into something?
I think there's an assumption. I assume that if you're cohabiting with somebody, it's a convenience, right?
Well,
we so happen that we're gonna
begins,
let's get a place together and we start living together. That's my assumption. I don't know, because if I was to cohabit with somebody, that might be the reason. Because I believe in marriage. I feel that for us to be able to move in, we should be married and have that expectation. Let's know what we're getting ourselves into. Which ways are we compatible or not compatible? Is this right for you? Is this right for me? As opposed to I'm looking for a flatmate. come and move into my place and let's share the bills.
So cohabiting couples, what did we decide? Do we think that they should get some or the same or all or none of the benefits that married couples have?
I do agree with one of the points that Esther made. I think when it becomes to longevity, I think when cohabiting couples can prove they've been together for a certain amount of years, then I do think there should be some sort of benefit, because I think it would be too soon to say if, for example, they've been together for just 2 years, they're cohabiting. There's no kind of major proof, as you say, of them being stuck with each other for a lifetime. So I think in that sense, they should have a license or some sort of something on paper. I guess it's the same as marriage license, but something on paper to say that, yes, we are together. We're not married, but we're together.
So basically they should get married.
Yeah, basically. My point exactly.
I disagree with that finding, though, that, children are worse off, because I know some amazing parents who are doing it on their own and their kids are just brilliant. I have friends who have been raising their children on their own. And even when people are married, sometimes it's the woman that's doing everything.
Absolutely.
She's the one raising the child,
Absolutely.
So I think that study's a bit...
To be honest, I'm not a fan of that study. It might end up in my trash can. I don't know. Thank you so much, guys. That's it from me, Afua Adom, and my fantastic guests, Natalie De Silva, Nick Poiros, and Esther Alladay. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget, every single episode of NONI, past and present, is online at yangatv.com. So wherever you are in the world, you can see this show and other great content from Yanga. Join us again soon for more entertaining chat. Goodbye.